The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
I like this guy a lot. I have a lot of really good intellectual chats and have some fun too as he's a new dad for the second time and a busy dude being the chief strategist over at, not chief strategist, right? Is that right?
That's right.
I nailed it. Darren Gill from Namaste Technologies, namastetechnologies.com. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Good. Got to take the red eye in, so a little sleep deprived between the kids and the flight, but we're doing all right.
You'll be fine. A little closer to the mic there. Let's pull you up here. Tell us, under the umbrella again of Namaste Technologies, what do you guys own a bunch of things?
Yeah, no, so we've got Namaste Vapes, which is our online vape sale portion. We have Namaste MD, which is our telemedicine application for anybody that needs to go through and get a medical document. And then we have CanMart, which is our licensed LP, has one of the widest varieties. At the last count, I think we had over 36 different products for folks to get on and choose from. So yeah, it's a fully integrated platform. We've got some real cool stuff with AI in the background. So it's on the up and up.
And in town with all the big players this week in Toronto, is this the Lift Expo? Is this considered one of the biggest trade shows to be at?
Toronto is definitely the biggest event in Canadian cannabis, and Lift's they've got a great platform. They've built a great reputation over the last few years, and we're honored to be here.
Was it a tough time getting a hotel with all the Raptors doing so well and stuff?
Yeah, the Raptors definitely drove up the price of hotels in the conference just a little bit, but you know what? It's a small price to pay to see them in the finals. So. Yeah,
without a doubt, man. It's so exciting. And tell us about the sort of the industry as a whole. You know, we catch up weekly, but when it's everyone's in town, there might be things that are new and everyone's discussing. Is there a common theme that you're hearing about or talking about with a lot of the bigger players?
I think a lot of folks are focused on the legalization changes coming down here in October, where we're going to see concentrates, edibles, tinctures start to enter the market. You're going to see a lot more of that. You and I have talked about a few times, the product portfolios start to open up. And that's where a lot of folks are focused on. But, conferences like this are just a fantastic opportunity for the industry folks to get together, form new business relationships. So Lyft does a fantastic job with having, a couple of days for industry to come meet before they do the retail conference for everybody to come through and kind of get to learn more about the different LPs.
Do investors at this point pay attention to the publicly traded companies going, are deals going down, or their connections being made? Is that something that people look for?
I think the rumor mill's kind of always there, and you post the wrong picture with somebody, or you get seen having a drink, and all of a sudden there's a deal to be had. So.
That's very interesting. So people, be cautious. People are just hanging out. Is the industry typical? Like, are you friendly with one another? All the different companies.
It's definitely a real small community, right? And everybody knows everybody. You kind of attend the same events. You start to get to know each other, and you start socializing on a personal level, even if you are competitors at work.
Are there some enemies, do you think?
I think, everybody kind of wants to be the biggest and the coolest and the hottest out there. But, generally, I my peer group, I absolutely love all of them. I think they're great guys, and definitely fun to go drink a beer with, or, other festivities.
Darren Gill from Namaste Technologies. You mentioned about the edibles coming to play October 17th and topicals and things that the government is now allowing to be legal as well. One of the things I've sort of been hearing is that, there seems to maybe be a bit of a shortage of cannabis anyway, but now is there going to even be a bigger shortage of cannabis because to extract from the flower is actually using more of the flower into these other products? And is that going to create, do we foresee any issues with that coming as well?
I think a lot of the LPs have started to plan their ramp-ups. The bigger players have their extraction partners lined up. I think definitely off the get-go, considering the number of licensed extractors is very, very limited. And the licensing process has been a little slower, even with the changes made. We're in catch-up mode now. It's probably not going to be till Q1, Q2 of 2020 where we really start to see the market demand start to stabilize.
How many extraction licenses are there out there? Do you know?
I know that there was about 30 folks that had a sales and processing license. Of that, the extractors, I wouldn't know off the top of my head.
Okay, but smaller numbers in LPs and sales and extractors.
Much smaller.
Okay, is that something that companies are sort of desperately trying to set as another arm to their business?
I think absolutely everybody's interested. Us at CanMart have an amendment in to be able to get an oil sales license as well. Again, open up more of that product selection to our customer base. base, and I think everybody out there is trying to find a way to offer that diversity to folks.
And one of the things, we'll text back and forth before you're popping in here and stuff, and you said, it's pretty wild right now what's going on, because there's a lot of vets making a big push for cannabis use for pets, right?
Yeah, no, actually, on the flight over, I was reading an article. I'd heard actually, oddly enough, on the radio on the way into work one morning that they were doing an event down at Parliament Hill where the Vet Society was going to be there. I think it was mid-May, and they were lobbying for pot for pets. And they brought up a lot of really interesting points with the space around, particularly because they're not able to prescribe it, and because preliminary research is showing it does help things like apnea and anxiety and pain for pets. Without having a proper channel to be able to meter and dose this, people are self-dosing their pets at home, and that's creating a real risk for the pets. And I think my favorite joke I wound up hearing about this is, we have warning labels for, keep out of reach of children, but there's no reference to pets on there. And when the Vet Society raised this, the government said, that's great. We're going to come back at the end of 3 years and revisit this when we look at the cannabis regime. To which the response was 21 dog years is far too long.
Well said. And how do you read keep out of reach in dog language? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Darren Gill. So that 3 year coming back in 3 years. Is that when the government is saying, hey, we're going to have a lot more studies and tests done to be able to really truly determine what this drug is doing, much like you would with a DIN number and studies in sort of old school pharma?
The 3 years was more around the actual, going through and revising the label. So something as simple as adding a warning of, hey, not only keep it away from your children, but keep it away from your pets. They said the process is set out the way it is, and if we need to do a revision, we'll do it at the next planned review period, which, I think is ridiculous if, this is an issue for folks with pets, and we've continued to hear through the Vet Society and through other industry folks that the number of cases of pets indigesting cannabis has continued to go up and up. Adding a simple label where people are a little more conscious, it's in your face, is a pretty simple change to make. And when the answer's 3 years, it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that they would want to take so long, especially why wouldn't we want to protect our pets best possible? But I also understand the case that maybe why pet owners would want to have their pet to do it. So we'll learn more with it. Darren Gill, we had other partners in earlier today who are also in town for Lift Expo called bovidainc.com. While they don't touch the plant, they help keeping it fresh with their product. And as we were talking, they were like, they're amazed by Jurassic Park. Yeah, because is that a big talk right now? Is everyone talking about Jurassic Park?
Yeah, no, definitely. I've just started getting into it myself, so.
Very cool. But one of the things, because they're from sort of the Southern Cal area and stuff, and one actually is originally from sort of the Oakland area. Oakland today announced that they're decriminalizing mushrooms, and we've had this
magic mushrooms.
Yep. So, will Canada start getting into this space as well? Do you think?
Well, I think Denver was one of the first to vote on it. Now Oakland, and I think very similar to cannabis, you're starting to see that movement, and I think we'll wind up following suit. Probably not in a short order, but the more it happens south of the border, it's going to get adopted up here as well.
And as maybe Oakland did it just today, so they can sneak it into some of the Raptors players for game 4, so they're not playing quite on their game or whatever. Darren Gill, who's here with us. Canadians are in a way uniquely, from what I'm seeing anyway online and stuff, uniquely critical of sort of cannabis not being what they're used to cannabis being, that there's some sort of issues there, like it's dry, this, that, moldy. You'll hear stories where, you don't think of Canadians as being complainers, I guess is what I'm getting at. Yeah. So is there a long way to go in this department still?
I think this is where the whole play around craft cannabis continues to come in. And, this was part of the frowned upon changes from the Health Canada improvements to the licensing process, is now having to have a fully built out facility to even go through an application process. You're forcing a lot of the small guys to spend capital that they may not have, where normally they would have gone through the process, been able to do some subsequent raises on as they advance through stages. I think capital crunch is biting these guys pretty hard. And, I think trying to grow in mega facilities where, you've got a million square feet of grow is hard to manage. Traditional black markets always been very batch, guys growing in their basement, growing on their farm. Each plant got a little more love and care.
Sorry, I've sort of lost what I was going to say there, to be honest, Darren. But when it comes to growing, do we think that? I guess I forget if I've asked you this question, is why I'm delaying. But do we think that there eventually it'll just be kind of like companies focused on growing and that's it? Much like you'll see tomato farmers like actually give it to the farmers. Do you think over time that's where it's headed?
I think right now you have a lot of LPs trying to cover the entire vertical of the market. They're managing everything from growing to customer service to distribution to, extraction to fulfillment. I think eventually as the industry streamlines, you're going to see it take more of a mainstream approach. A great comparison is oil and gas. The guys that do discovery. The guys that pull it out of the ground do it. The guys that do refining. And, everybody gets their box to play in and makes their chunk along the way. And, I think long term, you'll see cannabis start to evolve in that direction, especially as you go through a consolidation in the space. The number of LPs we have is fantastic for diversity, but the bigger guys are going to want to continue to get bigger, and I'm sure you're going to continue to see more M&A.
Darren Gill, Namaste Technologies. Is there any technological changes to cannabis?
I think from a technology perspective, there's a lot of industry leaders out there that are starting to play around with the automation of their facilities, how they can, I got the privilege of touring a facility at one LP where they have drones that actually go out over the crop and use photo recognition to look for mold or defects in the plants. And, that's pushing the boundaries. They're doing unique things to be environmentally friendly, like capturing rainwater and using that to hydrate the plants. So the industry scaling up has actually caused a lot of innovation within the space, which has been exciting.
And what about on the actual sort of tech side of app programs and computer programs and things like that, just for connecting and educating? Are we seeing good improvement there too?
I think similar to what Namaste does, there's more and more innovative thought leadership popping up around how we can improve integration, how we can use AI to help folks. A great example our CEO Many always gives is you go to a doctor, the doctor, you go in with a complaint of a headache. They're going to give you a prescription based on their experience, their understanding of your medical history. And if you go back in and say, I got some horrible side effect from this, they'll just give you a different prescription for a new drug. With cannabis today, when you go in and you get a prescription, you're not getting a prescription for a specific thing. You get prescription to go buy cannabis, and there's hundreds and hundreds of strains. So when you have a bad experience, how do you know what's going to work for you? And that's really where, taking crowdsourced data, getting feedback, user reviews, and compiling it and being able to make recommendations for people that would like to have a certain kind of symptom and outcome is really cool stuff that we're playing around with, and our industry peers are playing around with, to make sure people have much more better experience and ultimately a safer experience.
Is it tough though, because the Canadian government will still tell you can't make health claims?
Absolutely. And this is where again, health claims, and I support this, need to be backed up by science, and we've got to make sure the appropriate research is there, which is where the notion of recommendations, I think using data and feedback from consumers is the best we're going to get for the short term. It's this balancing qualitative and quantitative data. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of science-based data, so it's a lot of feedback from folks that is powering it.
I haven't ever asked this question. I've talked about the cannabis industry for quite some time now here on the program. But how do we know what's going on in sort of the schools and curriculum and educating at a young age? Like, we'll hear about sex ed all the time. Are we hearing about cannabis ed?
I honestly, I haven't heard about it myself, but I think as we continue to evolve and make this more mainstream and debunk the stigma, it's going to have to be something that's talked about more and more. I know that, growing up, when you went through the school system, you learned about not taking drugs, not drinking, being safe. And cannabis was one of those things that was kind of glanced over, although it was even mainstream when I was going to school. So I think, it's got to become part of the process.
And how's the public side of things? Namaste trading under the ticker symbol N and stuff, and always answering to shareholders, a big part of your business, and obviously with a continued growth and news and stuff like this. Everything's going well on that side of the biz.
Definitely. I mean, I think the public markets at times will be the public markets. The industry in the space has been taking a hit over the last week.
Yeah.
I think people either jump ship or jump into a bandwagon. But if you watch it, it's very cyclical. We're going into the summer season. Markets are slowing down, and people are starting to want to measure businesses more and more on fundamentals, which you'll again, this is the types of behaviors that will drive consolidation in the space. And as people look to ways to enhance revenue and ways to meet market expectations, it's another vehicle that's available to them.
What would have Namaste Technology's most recent sort of quarterly report show?
Our financials were just released and put out to CDAR on Friday. And if you look at our year over year, there has been growth in the business. We're continuing to try to drive things forward as best as possible. We've got a great cash balance. If you look at our kind of burn rate versus cash on hand, I think we're in a decent position to continue to grow and execute on our business plan. And much like everybody, fundamentals are starting to become important. So we're working on driving the business forward
and forecasting bigger numbers.
That part, we're not in a position to give guidance being a public company,
okay.
But we're working to grow our business as much as possible.
I keep hearing this term burn rate, and it's something that listen, I'm become very business minded, to be honest, even wanting to sort of get into my own kind of space within it, away from the radio show. And a lot of these, like, I think young companies that have raised a lot of capital because of the hype and stuff, I feel like they're really burning quickly through money, because really it's not their own money, and I think that's really quite frightening for a lot of companies. Investors should really be very careful about like you mentioned, that you have a great burn rate versus cash coming in and stuff. I don't think all the companies can say that so confidently.
No, there's companies that will burn in a quarter what we burn in a year, and granted they're sizing and scaling up, but there comes a point where it becomes unsustainable, and they've got to have that switch over to positivity and positive performance. But I think folks that invest, much like investing in any industry, should be wary of where their money is going and make sure they're doing their due diligence and that there is a path to profitability.
I was hanging out with actually a very successful businessman here in Toronto about a week and a half ago. And he sort of simplified it as simple as this. He held a bottle of water up, and he goes, there's so many companies right now that you got to be careful of. He goes, they're producing this bottle of water for $2, but they're only selling for $1. And he's like, and he goes, it's wild to me that's existing at this point. And a lot of times some very inexperienced business folks within the industry, they might be very big cannabis advocates, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can run a business.
No, and I think part of that comes down to school of thought as well. When you're in any growing industry, if you look, the investment comes before the profitability. And I think, to date, what you've seen the cannabis industry do is invest in growth potential, future growth, and really acquiring customers, patients, assets, whatever they've done. Very quickly, that does need to start to evolve to profitability. But I think, again, if you believe in the vision and you believe in a direction a company is headed, then a loss is perfectly acceptable as long as it's a conscious decision and you're doing it to scale up. I think Amazon's a fantastic example of this. They consciously came out about a month ago and said, we're planning to spend $800 million because we're going to go from 2-day Prime service to 1-day Prime service. When it's a conscious decision, that's great to spend the money in, because you're working towards a result.
Darren Gill, do you want to give a shout out to some of your management team here, other than many?
Chad, our CFO, Ken, has been doing a fantastic job. He's been under a lot of pressure getting the financials out, and the rest of the whole crew over there has been rock solid. They're a great group of guys to work with.
Still bringing in people to employ within Namaste Technologies?
We're always looking for the right talent to come join the team.
Excellent. NamasteTechnologies.com. There's
Absolutely.
A career section on the...
There is a career section on there.
Awesome, man. Well, it's so nice to catch up with you. Really enjoy Lift Expo. Your booth 503, correct?
503.
Namaste Technologies. Go and check out Darren Gill and the entire team. Learn everything that there is to do with Namaste Technologies and all the different companies under their umbrella. Booth 503, Lift Expo in town.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.